This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Warring parties in Libya meet in Moscow with high hopes that a ceasefire agreement will be formalized. The French president hosts African leaders from the Sahel region amid a wave of deadly militant attacks. And Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi concludes his Africa visit in Zimbabwe. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Searle-Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. And tonight, I'm alongside my colleague, Rama Yang, who has our business headlines. Rama.
Thank you very much, Richard. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. The South African retailer Massmart will shut down 34 stores. And China agrees to cut duties on Kenyan avocado exports. We'll have the details on those stories and lots more coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, though, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Richard.
Thanks a lot, Rama. We start the broadcast in Moscow. The Russian capital is hosting major players in the Libyan conflict. The Khalifa Haftar-led LNA and the UN-recognized Government of National Accord are expected to sign a ceasefire deal. On Sunday, they agreed to a conditional truce. The warring factions have already accused each other of breaking the truce. Turkey and Russia are behind these latest efforts to bring the Libyan rivals to the negotiation table. Both countries support opposing sides in the conflict. The head of the Tripoli-based government, Fayez al-Sarraj, is in Moscow and is expected to meet with Eastern Military Commander General Khalifa Haftar. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan touched on these developments.
Right now, we have to establish a ceasefire on the basis of an agreement. Our delegates continue the talks with the participation of all sides. I hope that a ceasefire agreement will be signed soon within this framework.
Well, for the latest on this, we are joined by Julia Chapman in Moscow. Julia, thank you for joining us here on Africa Live. This critical, crucial meeting, bring us up to speed with the latest from the Libya peace talks in the Russian capital.
Well, in the last hour, we've heard a press conference from the Turkish and Russian foreign ministers, and they have announced that while there was significant progress made today, there has not been an agreement signed by both sides, but there has been an agreement signed by one side. So they've made it part of the way, but they have not managed to get the leaders of the two Libyan rival factions to sign up to an extended ceasefire agreement. We understand that the Government of National Accord, the UN-backed government in Tripoli, their leader al-Sarraj has signed this agreement that was brokered between the Turkish and Russian foreign ministers, but Khalifa Haftar, the Eastern Libyan rebel commander, has not yet agreed to it. They had made some changes based on his recommendations, and he has asked for the night to think about those changes. And so tomorrow we may learn that a ceasefire that had come into place yesterday could be extended without any end date, but we don't yet know whether that will be going forward, and we still don't have very much other detail about what is involved in this agreement that still hasn't quite made it over the finish line.
All right, Julia, speaking of agreements, a number of attempts have been made before to broker peace in Libya. What makes these negotiations unique, and how likely are they to succeed?
Well, Russian officials think that their involvement could be part of the reason that this meeting took place. Of course, it's very unusual for the two rival leaders to meet. They have done, it's not unprecedented. They met last year in Abu Dhabi and 3 years ago in Paris, but it has been a while, and this is the first meeting of the two of them since Khalifa Haftar's forces had tried to take Tripoli in April last year. That's an offensive that they have been carrying on since then, and that is what these talks today were aimed at ending. They were trying to arrange a ceasefire. Yesterday, a temporary ceasefire came into place, but there are still many sticking points between the two rival factions in Libya before anything more permanent can be arranged. But involving the Russian side as well as the Turkish side, the two main backers of the different factions in Libya could have some progress, could make some movement forward in the right direction, but it doesn't seem that they've quite managed it just yet, although we could learn some updates tomorrow ahead of further peace talks in Berlin on Sunday.
All right, Julia Chapman talking to us from Moscow. Thanks for keeping a close eye on this story. Let's leave it there for the time being. Moving on, the European Union has welcomed Libya's ceasefire, but according to the EU, reconciliation efforts should be led by the United Nations. The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen spoke on the significant first step.
We all know a ceasefire, yes, it is a first step in the right direction. But what you need is a building process for reconciliation, for reconstruction, and for a government of unity in Libya. This is a long way to go, and this has to be a UN-led process. This is of utmost importance.
The Russian-Turkish brokered ceasefire came into effect over the weekend, but tensions remain high. Both sides are accusing each other of violations.
We are committed to the truce, but the enemy is still active. The blood of martyrs will not be lost. We are waiting for further instructions.
The ceasefire comes more than 9 months after forces loyal to Khalifa Haftar began their offensive in Tripoli. The leader of the Libyan National Army has been looking to topple Prime Minister Faiz al-Sarraj. If signed, the truce will pave way for the revival of the political process and bring calm to the oil-rich nation. More than 300 people have been killed and thousands of Libyans displaced. The ceasefire has taken a hand of many African and European nations. But the two major power brokers have been Turkey and Moscow. Presidents of the two countries called for the truce last week in Istanbul. In January, Ankara dispatched military support to the GNM. Moscow has repeatedly been accused of helping Haftar. Libya has remained split between the two fighting rival administrations, who stepped in to fill a political void left after the death of former ruler Muammar Gaddafi. Chomgono, CGTN.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there. To see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
French President Emmanuel Macron is hosting his counterparts from 5 Sahel countries in the southwestern city of Pau. The leaders from Mauritania, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Chad will be discussing the fight against armed groups and the French military presence in the region. Macron's meeting with the Sahel leaders was initially scheduled for mid-December, but it was postponed after 71 Niger troops were killed in a raid. Despite the creation of the G5 Sahel Task Force and the presence of 4,500 French soldiers and UN peacekeepers, jihadist groups in the region have stepped up their attacks.
The summit in Pau is for remobilizing and adapting to a new context, and the fact that everyone will be there, the 5 Sahel countries, but also the European Union, the African Union and the United Nations, will allow for a new mobilization to halt this tragedy at the door of Europe, because the Sahel is now at the border of southern Europe.
All right, to discuss this further, we are joined live by our correspondent, Ross Cullen in Paris. Ross, thank you for joining us here on Africa Live. Ross, talk to us about the significance of the meeting between the French president and the African leaders from the Sahel region.
Yeah, hi, Richard. Very important. If you just put it like that, look at the guest list who's attending, not just Mr. Macron and the 5 leaders from the Sahel countries, but also the head of the African Union, the European Union's top diplomat, and the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, underlining how the security and the stability of the Sahel is not just critical for that region or for Europe, but for the wider world as well. And the talks are now underway between Mr. Macron and the other leaders. We saw the 5 presidents from the Sahel pause to pay tribute to the 13 French soldiers who lost their lives in a helicopter collision late last year. They laid wreaths and now the talks are underway, and we're going to be seeing over the next few hours how they progress, and if the focus is indeed going to be on a possible political settlement to go hand in hand with the military mission. So those talks are underway at the moment in Po in the south of the country, Richard.
Well, this meeting comes amid rising anti-French sentiment in the Sahel. How is this being addressed?
Well, Mr. Macron is going to pick up this topic almost certainly in the meeting. He's said before he's become frustrated over the last few months if he sees what he's described as ambiguity amongst some of the national administrations over the French mission in the Sahel. He'll want to hear backing, see the reassurances made by those five presidents. They do still support the French mission Operation Barkhane in the Sahel. We've seen demonstrations, particularly in Mali and Niger, the burning of French flags, chanting of anti-French slogans, and of course France has to be careful. It's the former colonial power in the region, so it will want to see support from the presidents, who themselves will want to try to understand the atmosphere of their publics. It's important for the security and stability. They need outside partners such as France, but they don't want to be seen to be coming under France's control again, and they do want to see a resolution. We see lots of people being displaced and the loss of lives as well, so particularly civilian lives. So those presidents of the Sahel region will be bringing that issue up with Mr. Macron as well.
All right, Ross. There is a regional force in the Sahel and the presence of French troops, about 22,000 troops in total. What is being done to stop the wave of deadly attacks by militants, and what are the main challenges, and why haven't they been successful so far?
Well, France brought this operation 7 years ago now to try to secure stability in the region, reduce the violence, disrupt and dismantle these armed groups, and then encourage the national administrations to take over responsibility for security more and more themselves. But it's been very hard for France and the local soldiers from the five countries as well, working with them to achieve those aims. Just look at the Sahel, Richard, this vast region, the semi-arid region covering parts of these five countries. It's proved easy and fertile ground for these insurgents, many of whom are associated with Al-Qaeda or Islamic State as well, to come out and lay IEDs, hopefully targeting, in their opinion, the blasts focused towards the French troops and the local soldiers supporting them as well. Of course, civilians have been caught up in those blasts as well, carry out attacks and then retreat back into the Sahel to regroup. And so the political settlement now is going to be seen as maybe that's a way of ensuring the stability. They've tried the French military mission leading the way. If there can be a political settlement going along with that now, that may be a way that the six men can get an agreement on securing the stability of the Sahel going forward.
All right, Ross Cullen speaking to us live from Paris. Ross, thank you for keeping a close eye on that story. We'll talk to you again soon. Moving on, meanwhile, the meeting in France comes in the wake of deadly attacks in the Sahel region. CGTN's Deji Badmus has more on this growing insecurity in the wider West African region.
The meeting was originally scheduled for last December but had to be postponed following a jihadist attack on a military camp in Niger, which killed at least 70 soldiers. There have been several deadly attacks across the Sahel since then. In the latest one, suspected jihadists killed 25 soldiers in the town of Chanagodra in Niger's southwest, bordering Mali. The surge in terrorist attacks in the region will be top on the agenda, but French President Emmanuel Macron has made it very clear he wants a straight answer from the Sahel G5 leaders, whether or not they want French troops to continue to operate in the region.
There is this impression that they are losing the fight, the war against terrorism. And so something drastic obviously needs to be done. And that's why the meeting is extremely very crucial. Of course, we know that the United Nations has stationed about 12,000 troops in that region. The French forces are about 4,500 in numbers. And then the G5, the groups of countries making up that area of the Sahel region, about 5,000. So you are talking effectively of about 22,000 troops, out there to stem the tide of terrorism. Obviously, it has not worked. The violence has spiked, and so there is a little bit of the need. There is a need to spike up, whatever intervention that we have to be done in that region, and that's why this meeting is very crucial.
There's been a rising anti-French sentiment across the Sahel, with many demanding the withdrawal of French troops. Most of the complaints stem from frustration over the increasing spate of jihadist attacks in the region, despite the presence of about 4,500 French troops there.
The countries of the region need much more help that they can get. And so withdrawal of foreign troops might not exactly help the situation. Of course, there's something that they can do. I'm talking of foreign governments. They need to begin to look at political solutions. They need to begin to look at economic solutions. They need to begin to look at the issue of extreme poverty that is making it possible for these groups to recruit ordinary citizens who are frustrated by what is happening in their country.
International support for the fight against the jihadists in the Sahel has been anything but encouraging. Funding pledges made to better equip the G5 Sahel force set up to take on the terrorists have not materialized. And despite having around 15,000 personnel in Mali alone, the UN has not been able to make much inroad in bringing peace to that troubled country, which serves as a launching pad for the jihadists in the Sahel. President Macron is hoping to use this meeting to further galvanize international support for the Sahel. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Villages in Nigeria continue to bear the brunt of clashes between Fulani herdsmen and farmers. Attacks carried out by Fulani militants killed more people in 2018 than Boko Haram. CGTN's Philly Haza has more on the growing insecurity concern.
Families, friends and well-wishers gathered to bury more than 70 people in Benue State, north-central Nigeria. This attack is one of many seen in villages in the region in recent years, carried out by suspected nomadic Fulani herders. Fulani herdsmen are predominantly found in the Sahel and desert regions of West Africa, including northern Nigeria.
The major occupation of an average Fulani herder is rearing cattle from a very tender age. They move their animals from place to place in search of pasture and water.
Conflict between herders and farmers dates back over 2 decades ago. Farmers have long accused the nomads of allowing their cattle to destroy crops. But the herders say that their cattle have been poisoned and in some cases stolen by farmers, causing them severe losses. Since 2015, the country has witnessed growing violence from some herders who now wield sophisticated weapons and ammunition. The Global Terrorism Index reports that the violence has claimed the lives of over 1,158 people and displaced more than 300,000 in 2018 alone. Security analysts say the latest killings have gone beyond intercommunal clashes between farmers and herders over land and water.
It appears as though there has been a collaborative effort of cross-border ethnic Fulani herdsmen to actually weigh in favor of the Fulani now what you call the balance of power, or what you can call balance of force in the ongoing or perennial farmer herders clashes. What we are witnessing today is no longer farmer herder clashes. It's pure criminality. In fact, some of the suspected herdsmen do not have cattle. They're not cattle breeders.
Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari has been widely criticized for not being fair in dealing with the issue because he is an ethnic Fulani. His efforts to create rural grazing settlements to restrict herders' movements across the country have been viewed by many in Nigeria as land grabbing by the Fulani tribe. Experts say the government and neighboring countries in the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, may need to focus more on securing their borders.
It is Nigeria to seek the understanding of ECOWAS, and if possible, even pull out of the ECOWAS Free Movement Treaty temporarily, momentarily, to solve the problem of influx of cross-border militiamen into the country who share ethnic identity with Nigerians on the fringes of our northwest borders. Because if this is not done, there will be a continuous free flow of ethnic militiamen, mostly of the Fulani herdsman stock, into the country. And that might continue to perpetuate the ongoing security challenges being faced in Nigeria.
President Buhari has promised to deploy more security to prevent further attacks and to bring the perpetrators to justice. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
And the news continues on Africa Live. We'll see you on the other side of the break. Here's a look at what's ahead. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi concludes his Africa visit in Zimbabwe. We'll tell you how trash is being put to good use in South Africa.
Economic data out of the country.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Penina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives. News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has wrapped up his African tour. Wang Yi paid a courtesy call on Zimbabwe President Emerson Mnangagwa on Monday, where he reaffirmed China's commitment to stronger ties with Africa. CGTN's Farai Mwakatuya with the details.
Smiles all round as Zimbabwe and China reaffirmed their commitment to a partnership which was elevated to strategic cooperation level in 2018. After talks with Zimbabwe's foreign minister, vice president, and meeting the head of state, Wang Yi left the country satisfied.
I was very happy that he had occasion to go over our relations between the People's Republic of China and Zimbabwe on all issues. And he goes back home satisfied that our relations are on a solid foundation. What remains is further consolidation and deepening those relations, both political and economic.
Wang Yi will also be satisfied by his entire African tour, during which China reiterated that it's a brother, friend, and partner to the continent. As the largest developing country in the world, it's only natural that China should partner with Africa, home to the largest number of developing nations. Wang Yi highlighted that China has laid more than 6,000 kilometers of road and rail, built nearly 20 ports and more than 80 power facilities on the continent. In addition, more than 130 medical facilities, 45 stadiums and over 170 schools have been constructed. In excess of 200,000 African professionals have been trained by China, an important intervention towards human capital development.
Those are all decisions that have unprecedented and major impact on the history of China-Africa relations, and those steps have pushed China-Africa cooperation into a new era. China has full confidence in the future of Africa's development. We have full confidence in the future of China-Africa cooperation, and we will continue to make China-Africa cooperation a forerunner in international cooperation on Africa.
Africa has already been established as China's first international industrial capacity cooperation partner and is poised to accrue further benefits under the Belt and Road Initiative and FOCAC framework. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
South Africa's Deputy President David Mabuza is in Juba, South Sudan to facilitate talks to try and resolve a dispute over boundaries and the number of administrative units in the country. The matter is one of the sticky points that continue to divide President Salva Kiir and opposition leader Riek Machar. CGTN's Patrick Oyet reports.
South Africa's deputy president is in Juba, where he will spend 4 days. Parties to South Sudan's peace agreement have postponed formation of a unity government twice now. The reasons for the delay includes disagreement over the number and boundaries of states,
President Salva Kiir wants to maintain the current 32 states. The opposition group led by Riek Machar wants between 21 to 23 states. Machar's group says the current system favors President Kiir's group because it would allow him to appoint many of his loyalists as local government officials, which would later translate into more votes during elections scheduled for the end of the transitional period. South Africa's deputy president is hoping to have the parties agree on a way forward.
Deputy President is here to resolve the matter of the states and their boundaries, and he will be meeting with the different parties, which include President Salva Kiir, Maya, and Dr. Riek Machar.
The talks led by the South Africa's deputy president begin on Monday and end on Thursday this week. A unity government is supposed to be formed by February 22nd, but that will only happen once all these outstanding issues are resolved. Patrick Koyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
The army in the Democratic Republic of Congo says it has killed at least 40 Islamist rebels and captured their headquarters. An army spokesperson said that 30 soldiers were killed and 70 others wounded in the battle against the Allied Democratic Forces in North Kivu province. CGTN's Chris Ochimringa has more from Kinshasa.
The Congolese army says it has captured the headquarters of the Allied Democratic Forces in North Kivu province. The army's regional spokesperson, Major Mark Hazukai, says their troops killed 40 rebels and took over the headquarters in a battle at Medina. He says 30 of the soldiers were killed and 70 others injured in the fighting. The Allied Democratic Forces is an Islamist militia that's originally from Uganda. It's accused of killing more than 200 civilians in the eastern town of Beni between November and December last year. The rebels have carried out several attacks in eastern DRC where there's an ongoing Ebola outbreak. The attacks have seriously hampered the containment of the deadly disease. The Congolese army launched a large-scale military offensive against the rebels in October last year, but the rebels have continued killing civilians in Beni and its surrounding territories. UN peacekeepers are now carrying out joint operations with the Congolese army to wipe out the rebels. Chris Ochimringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Ethiopia is investigating the kidnapping of nearly 30 university students in its western region. The government says 21 students have been freed so far, but 6 are still being held captive. This is the first time the government is speaking out on the kidnapping, which took place in December 2019. CGTN's Coletta Wanjohi reports from Addis Ababa.
The students were abducted on 4th of December as they traveled from Addis Ababa to Dembidolo University, which is over 600 kilometers to the west of the country. One female student who escaped says they were intercepted by gunmen. She claims the gunmen said they were from the Oromo Liberation Front. This group was engaged in armed struggle against the government for over 2 decades and was labeled a terror group. But in 2018, the parliament struck it off from this list. The government says the 21 that have been released so far were released in what it terms as a peaceful manner. It, however, doesn't disclose if ransom was paid for their release. The government has suffered a backlash from citizens who have blamed it for being quiet for over a month since the abduction. This is one of the insecurity incidents in universities around the country that Ethiopia has suffered in the past year. Many claim it is fueled by growing ethnicity politics. Coletta Wanjohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Plastic bottles in South Africa's Cape Town are being put to good use. One organization is turning them into bricks, providing a unique solution to the country's trash disposal problem. CGTN's Asta Tal has more.
When Matt Baker sits among these bottles, he doesn't see waste. Instead, he sees potential building materials. Waste ED, co-founded by Baker, uses the bottles to make eco-bricks.
So making eco-bricks as a temporary solution is very important to see it as a temporary solution so that we really can focus on the bigger problems, the source problem, not just, the problem that there's waste around us and that it's not very nice to look at, but rather dealing with the root of it, that producing these types of non-recyclables isn't right.
Indeed, the country faces a waste management challenge. Out of the 42 million tons of waste generated in 2017, only 11% was recycled. WasteED is collaborating with the Natural Building Collective to test their eco-bricks in different climatic conditions.
And we're going to do a couple more freestanding tests in the parking lot, just lighting unplastered eco-brick walls, just to see how they behave. Because eco-bricks have been used in every fashion you can imagine. And what's nice about the testing phase here is that we will be able to provide data to people all over the world.
School children are also taking part in the fun.
It is very colorful, and that the children learn all different kinds of colors of the eco-bricks. And we first used to throw it away into buns, but now I can see what you can all out of the the bottles and all the papers. You can buy all kinds of stuff with it.
Residents of Cape Town can join in Waste ED's efforts by dropping off their bottles in the over 20,000 eco-brick collection points. Astatal, CGTN.
This is Africa Live on CGTN. Let's now go to Rama for the latest business news. Rama.
Thank you very much, Richard. Here's what's coming up in business. The South African retailer Massmart will shut down 34 stores. And China has agreed to cut import duties on Kenyan avocado exports.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
All right, then let's start in the world of retail. Massmart is the latest South African retailer to announce possible store closures in 2020. Now, the company says it could cut up to 1,440 jobs in the process. The announcement comes just 3 months after Michelle Slapp took over as Massmart's CEO with a brief to turn around the retailer. Massmart right now owns Game, Dion Wide and Macro, among other brands. It has already closed 2 outlets in the first half of 2019. At the same time, the company said that its Dion Wide sales had been affected by low consumer confidence, which in turn caused a decline in customer traffic at major shopping malls. Customers also put on hold purchases of high-priced electronic items as South Africa's economy continues to be in desperate need of a kickstart. Elsewhere, China has agreed to cut the duty levied on Kenyan avocado exports from 30% down to 7%. That's a significant move for Kenyan farmers who have for years been eyeing a slice of this 1.4 billion lucrative Asian market. The East African nation says getting just 100 million people in China buying Kenyan avocado exports would be a significant achievement. Accessing China's domestic market, though, will not be a walk in the park for Kenya. The country has been fighting over the last 7 years to have its avocado get access to the market in fresh form, but relatively tough handling conditions that the world's second largest economy has imposed remain in place, and that has cast a bit of doubt on the optimism about getting access to this market. On to West Africa now. Nigerian banks have started implementing the revised guide to bank charges for consumers. The new central bank directive mandates commercial banks and non-bank financial institutions to cut fees applicable to bank accounts, electronic transfers and ATM services too. With the details, here's CGTN's Uche Okoronko.
The revised policy is part of a new guideline released by the Central Bank of Nigeria. It replaces the guide to charges by banks and other financial institutions issued in 2017. While it may be reviewed from time to time, experts believe it would have a positive impact on the well-being of Nigerians and the economy in general.
It will reduce the burden, the financial burden on individuals, because at times, in some banks in Nigeria, when you carry out a transaction once, they still charge you that 65 naira. But with CBN stepping in now and actually threatening the banks that anyone that contravenes this new policy will be sanctioned, I think it is, a fantastic thing for the Nigerian populace and for Nigerians.
Typically, Nigerian banks charge roughly 14 US cents for all interbank transfers via digital channels regardless of the amount being transferred. Also, ATM users will only be allowed to make 3 withdrawals from banks other than their parent bank in a month, after which they will be charged roughly 18 US cents. There are also monthly fees for ATM maintenance and SMS alerts. But the new CBN directive changes all this, while resonating with millions of Nigerians who are often discouraged from embracing digital channels.
It's a good development because the bank charges are really a lot. Now, you want to transfer something, they charge you. You want to use the POS, they charge you. You want to use the ATM, they charge you. They charge you for your SMS that you get, your email notifications, everything. They charge you for literally everything.
As per the new CBN directive, account holders will only pay about 10 naira for electronic transfers below 5,000 naira and 25 naira for transfers between 5,000 to 50,000 naira. Additionally, only electronic transfers above 50,000 naira will attract a 50 naira charge. Card maintenance fee, on the other hand, has been reviewed to 50 naira every 3 months from the initial monthly period. To enforce the directive, the Central Bank of Nigeria states that any financial institution that breaches any of the provisions will face a penalty of about $5,500 for every violation. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
And we're still in Nigeria. MTN Nigeria is set to start the process of withdrawing a case it had filed against the Office of the Attorney General and the Minister of Justice. Now, that move comes after the latter, that's the AG's office, withdrew a tax demand of $2 billion against the South African telecommunications giant. Nonetheless, this is not the end of the story. Instead, MTN will now have to engage with the Nigerian tax and customs authorities in order to solve this dispute. In 2018, Nigeria's Attorney General demanded $2 billion in tax arrears from MTN, but Africa's largest mobile operator at the time argued that the claim had no merit and, in its view, it was outside the authority's jurisdiction. Shares in MTN Group rose by about 5% at the JSE upon the announcement. Nigeria is MTN's biggest market. It has roughly 60 million users over there. On to Sudan now. It's passed a new regulation that essentially allows private traders to export about 70% of the gold they buy or mine in the country. The new policy is designed to address smuggling, attract foreign currency into the country's cash-strapped treasury as well. Sudan's central bank was the only body that was legally allowed to buy and export that precious metal. Only the bank could establish centres to purchase the precious metal from small-scale artisanal miners. But under this new law, private mining companies can now export their products, provided they deposit the proceeds in local banks. In 2018, an estimated 93 tons of gold was mined in Sudan, effectively making it Africa's third largest gold-producing nation. On to Zimbabwe now. Civil servants there have rejected a 97% proposed salary increment. The civil servants argue that the offer is just way too short and it's not enough, in their view, to cushion them against inflation. At this point in time, Zimbabwe is still experiencing its worst economic crisis in about a decade. The Southern African economy reintroduced its local currency, the Zimbabwean dollar, last year. But that in turn did spark a rise in prices of basic goods and services, and inflation shot up. Economists now argue that actually might have hit 400% last November. Salaries have also lagged behind, and that in turn has angered workers as they see their purchasing power completely erode. That includes teachers, but mostly doctors at state hospitals who have been on strike since September. All right then, so what is the world's best-selling distilled alcoholic drink? Apparently it's not vodka or whiskey, but Baiju. Our reporter Jamie Owens has been hunting down this spirit in London.
This is the world's most popular spirit, but you may not have heard of it.
We're making one of the classic cocktail well known in the world. It's made with Baiju. It's margarita to make a sweet and sour and refreshing cocktail.
Baiju is China's biggest selling alcoholic drink, and it's hoping to make a splash in Europe. It's quickly finding a home in bars from Stockholm to London as an exotic cocktail ingredient.
When I first heard people asking for Baiju, I was thinking, what is that? And I looked into it, and to find a spirit that has something like 20 billion bottles sold every year, and we didn't know about it. And if you think how gin has changed over the last few years, it really was Gordon's and Trepp's many years ago. Now we've got probably 30 or 40 different gin brands here, and I fully foresee having a Baiju based bar with 20, 30 different Baiju.
With an alcohol content of at least 40%, Baiju is stronger than your standard vodka or whiskey and has various categories based on aroma.
There we go, you have the celebrity. So I advise you to buy the marshmallow, so it's going to have a little sweet, and then you sip your cocktail.
While bars across London have taken up the Baiju trend, it's still absent from the shelves of most European supermarkets, but this one does stock it.
It's quite a sexy product, and I think that's what sells it to people, and I think that they want to try it. It's something new, it's something different. You won't have tasted anything like this. You can pick up a 100ml bottle for under £5, or you can go really up into the thousands for, premium aged brands.
This is surely one of the most famous shops in the world. This is Harrods department store right in the heart of London, and one of the few places in the UK that stocks Baiju.
Harrods takes pride in its exclusive stock of Baiju, and some bottles don't even have a price tag. As they say in Knightsbridge, if you have to ask the price, you probably can't afford it. Jamie Owen, CGTN, London.
All right, then I'll leave it there for the time being. I'll be back at the top of the hour. We'll be looking at a key story in the Horn of Africa all the way to the north. Crunch time is upon us in talks on Ethiopia's Grand Renaissance Dam. The efforts to break the deadlock underway in Washington, D.C. But will we have a deal by the 15th of January? We'll find out from Addis and Cairo. For now, back to Richard.
Thanks a lot, Rama. We have a lot more wonderful, amazing stories coming your way on Africa Live. Here's a sneak peek at the headlines. The Snake Man of Lagos, how one man is saving endangered animals in Nigeria.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. In Lagos, Nigeria, one man has made it his life's mission to save endangered animals. Dr. Mark Ofoa, a veterinarian, rehabilitates animals such as snakes before releasing them into the wild. CGTN's Deji Badmus has more on that story.
He is called the Snake Man of Lagos, and it's because of his closeness and care for the creepy and dreaded reptile. In a society where the first instinct is either to run away or kill the creature on sighting it, Mark Ofoa is trying to show people here that a snake can actually be a friend.
I started a crusade to educate people more about snakes and the need to conserve them, because this fear of snakes has led to us killing them with prejudice, So I go about teaching people respect for snakes, how to cohabit with snake and all that.
He says he developed a special love for snakes from his teenage years after an awkward experience while studying in a garden.
While I was reading, I felt a sensation on my feet and I looked down and there was a cobra. I paused in fear. The cobra also must have sensed my movement. It paused in fear and our eyes were locked for what seemed like eternity. And then after a while, he just faced forward and slithered away. From then, I started asking myself, so snakes are not really the mindless killing machines we think them to be. And then that sparked up an interest, and I've been studying snakes ever since.
Ofoa is today a practicing veterinarian and an animal conservationist specializing in small animal practice. He runs St. Mark's Animal Hospital and Shelter in Lagos. Besides dogs and cats, which are common in his shelter, there are also rare and endangered species as well, like the pangolin. He rescues most of the endangered species that are not dead from local hunters and brings them to his shelter for rehabilitation before releasing them back into the wild.
The point where these animals come from is the hunters. These are the people that go into the bush to get these animals for the bushmeat trade. So yes, I try to create a relationship with them where if there are traps, I try to educate them to stop, but this is their source of livelihood. I tell them that good, if you get anyone alive, if you get anyone sick or injured, just bring it to me. Babies especially, that they can't eat obviously, they bring them to me. Now I do my best not to pay. I try to create a relationship with them where I exchange services for these animals. And it's been working like that.
Ofwa says he may not be able to save all the animals in need, but for everyone he rehabilitates and releases back into the wild, the effect on the world at large cannot be quantified.
For every animal that I release back to the wild, I can't put in words the feeling. It's almost spiritual. It's ethereal, I can assure you. The fact that you know that if not for you, this particular animal would have been killed and eaten or used for rituals or something, but you have stepped in and you've given this animal another lease on life and then released to the wild where it can go live its life and procreate. You're something like a savior.
There are over 60 animals in his shelter here that he must cater for on a daily basis. It's a lot of hard work, but it's one Ofwa says he's always happy doing.
The major work in conservation of animals can only be done by the government. You understand? They're the ones that can put laws to protect the species. They're the ones that can create parks that would ensure survival of the species and all that. But if we leave the whole work for the government to do, they will be overwhelmed because they have a government to run. So this is my way of contributing my quota to conservation of the species.
Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Hundreds of Chinese living in Uganda have come together to celebrate the Chinese New Year. The celebrations will last for about 2 weeks. CGTN's Leon Siyenga reports.
The celebration of a new year. Hundreds of Chinese and Ugandans gathered here to enjoy the carnival atmosphere. The extravaganza was a blend of traditional Chinese customs that included dancing and feasting.
This is Guangdong food, okay? This is called baozi. This is for chanfen, okay? This is for pork feet, maybe some, and this is chicken feet.
In modern China, the celebration is also known as the Spring Festival. It can last for up to 16 days. This is the biggest Chinese New Year event ever celebrated here. It gives visitors the opportunity to learn lots about the Chinese culture, from food to trade and music too. An exciting experience for many, even for Zach Rubega, who tried his hand at Chinese calligraphy.
They're amazing. You just write as if you're writing symbols, symbols known to us, but in actual sense, they are characters and they have meaning.
These university students hope to get into the new Chinese year as a couple, acting a traditional Chinese marriage.
I've loved every second of having this experience. It's wonderful.
With the celebration also comes the hope for better things.
We always have our very many wishes, like making more money. And if you are students, the study is doing more well, and the work is more goes well, kind of about health.
According to the Chinese zodiac calendar, 2020 will be the year of the rat, a symbol of wealth. Leon Sanyange, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Guess what? We've got your sports news coming up after the break. Here's what's ahead. Uganda prepares for a busy rugby season in 2020.